Good evening, everybody. It is exactly 6 o'clock and we're in Twitter Spaces on Gather to Grow once again. My name is Dawn Numdu. I'm the manager for audience and engagement at Food Film Zanzi. And I have a lovely co-host with me tonight, Lungaela Lingelo. And we're talking about balancing your books, tips for new farmers. Good evening, Gu. Great to have you with me again on the space. How are you?
Good evening, Dawn, and thank you so much for having me in the space. I'm really excited. More than anything, I'm curious on, as us farmers, how do we keep our books balanced? Because, we know everything about farming, but when it comes to record keeping and books and all of that, not so much.
So true. So we obviously have our speakers here, who's the experts in the room, to tell us all about that and to share all of their knowledge for us all to gather and grow here. So I'm going to start by asking each of them to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about what they do, and then we'll take it from there. I'm going to start with Frugal Sibusiso. Frugal, great to have you here on Gather to Grow. Tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm frugal. I'm extremely frugal. Basically, I play in the personal finance space. I've got my own businesses actually. I come from just how to manage your money and how to manage your money well. And I think that there are some principles that you can apply all the way through. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me. And like I said, most people call me, like when I go to Starbucks even, call me Sibusiso. So frugal or Sibusiso, both are fine.
Thanks so much for being here. Next up, I have Mbali Nyebe. Mbali is an agricultural advisor and agri-specialist. Welcome, Mbali, and so great to have you with us. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Dawn. So I'm Mbali. I'm an agri-specialist or agri-advisor I'm in the financial sector. Basically, my day-to-day job is actually to look at the books as well as give advice in terms of what is currently happening in the industry, as well as helping them with doing viability studies. So yeah, that's what I do on a living.
Thanks so much, Mbali. And then we have Roisin. Roisin is a business coach and consultant, and she's actually the one who said, hey, let's talk about balancing the books. I'm in for Roisin. Welcome to Gather to Grow. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Dawn. I am a numbers girl. I'm 20-year finance career behind me. I recently qualified as a business coach because I really like helping people. I want to be dealing with people and numbers, and basically I help businesses to grow profitably.
Thanks so much for being here, Roisin. It's great to have you with us. Then last, we have Lungaela. Lungaela is an accountant, and he's not new to this platform. I have had him on one of our previous sessions, so you might remember him from there. Lungaela, welcome once again to Gather to Grow. Tell us a little bit about yourself, people who may not know you, then we'll get the show on the road.
I'm Lungaela. I'm an accountant. I'm also a tax expert, so I assist businesses with their books, but especially with their tax matters.
Thank you so much, Lungaela. And I know that when the tax man comes knocking, and with everything being online, maybe not so much knocking, literally, but that you kind of want to keep your accountant close. And I'm really happy to have all of our experts and speakers here tonight. Gugu, I think we usually start with the basics of the basics. So I'm going to start by asking our experts, and maybe some of them will contribute, or all of them can maybe say something about this. The first thing that farmers should understand when managing their finances, especially if they're running a small business and they're just starting out in the industry. And my question is around, is there a difference between a smaller producer or someone who's running a smaller business, or to compare to the bigger players in the game? Frugal, because you started, would you maybe like to kick off the conversation tonight?
There's obviously, a little bit of a difference with regards to smaller and bigger producers. But I think the important thing for me is that there's some principles for people starting out that they need to understand. And that is, which is very important, obviously, the principle that's saying that you need to project that you're going to make more than what you're actually going to spend. And I think the other one is, and that's something in farming that's very, very important, is also thinking about what happens if things go wrong. What happens if a hailstorm destroys my whole crop, or what happens when these things do happen. And I think it's very important just to think forward concerning these things.
Definitely, and that's definitely something that we want to touch on later, Gugu, in terms of the overall thinking of a farmer and also the volatile space that they navigate in continuously. And you yourself obviously experienced this as well. Roisin, maybe you can also come in here.
I do absolutely agree with Frugal's two very important points, make more than you spend, and what happens if something goes wrong. What I would like to add is, when people think about finances and numbers and taxes, I think that we need to kind of separate a few things out, and just loosely, one needs to just think about finances as there's the management of capital, like if you've got a loan or funding, and then there's record keeping, then there's running your business. How are you going to run your business through your numbers? And it's not only about the record keeping. So that's about yields and comparisons, making projections, thinking of finance and tax as just one huge pot, and it can be terribly overwhelming. And yes, there is a difference between bigger organizations, bigger businesses, and smaller, but like the principles are the same.
Absolutely, Rashina. And thank you so much for that, because I think all of us farmers can agree that it takes more than a love of the land and good weather to farm. It takes a sound business head. So obviously managing farm finances may be the most difficult part of making a living in agriculture. We all know this. So I just want to start and maybe speak from a small business perspective. There's taxes, there's operating loans, there's capital purchases, labor costs, and all of that require like knowledge of financial rules and products, not to mention a good relationship with a banker, an accountant, or understanding the rules of accountancy. So how can a small farmer start? I've registered my business, I have a tax number. Now it's time for me to understand balancing sheets or even present a good business plan that has a financial plan. Like, what are the basics that I need to know to make sure that I spend money and I make money?
For me, the most important thing that I've experienced, especially with startups, is that first of all, you need to separate your personal bank account from your business bank account. Because once you start mixing the two, it's the start of trouble. Well, the business is not going to fall. Of course, it's not going to collapse. But in terms of managing your books, I think for me, that's my start. Try to, when you've registered your business or when you're just running your business, whether it's a sole trader, try to at least get a business bank account so that all your business transactions are done in that account. Avoid mixing personal and business.
You're back in Bali and much clearer now. Thanks.
Most of the speakers have covered what I basically wanted to add with regards to the bookkeeping portion. And I think going on to the next question that has just been asked in terms of putting together a good business plan, I think what is really important here is before you even start, you need to know what you want to do, not comparing it to what everybody else wants to do. And then do a bit of research in terms of what is expected and what one can get in the area in terms of going back to that portion of the yields and knowing exactly what can grow or what it is that can be farmed in that area that you are in. So starting by knowing that, I think it's better off to start there. And then the research around what is happening in the market in your area becomes important. And those are building blocks of actually knowing how to build a great business plan. It's first knowing what you want to do, what is happening in the industry and in your area, and then looking at the numbers. Because if you don't know what is happening in that area or what can grow in that area, it becomes difficult to then project what you can get out of the ground in that area.
Thanks so much, Mbali. Roisin, do you have maybe something else to add to Gugu's question before I move on?
I think it is the difficulty that every small business or even every business has. You as the farmer, you as the business owner, you're the expert in that field. You might not be an expert in sales, marketing, operations, finances, tax, all these other things. You have to wear all these different hats. And of course, if you're in a smaller business, you really have to do all these things on your own until you're at a point in your business where you can outsource these things. So yes, ultimately, you will decide all of these things, what you are going to do, how you are going to do them, and it will form of your business plan. Definitely, like Mbali said, before you will do the research and what is it that you want to do. If I may just introduce a very simple way of looking at any difficulty that you have in your business, even when it comes to business plans, introducing who, what, when, where, how, and why. Ask yourself the questions. Who is going to do my tax? Who is going to do my bookkeeping? Who am I going to serve? Who is my client? So asking yourself all those who questions. And then what? What am I going to sell? What am I going to do? What am I going to do myself? And then when? When am I going to do this by? And when am I going to sell what produce? Because they're different seasons, they're different harvesting times, all sorts of things, and different areas. Where am I going to do it? The next question, where? Where am I going to sell my goods? Where am I going to market myself? Where am I going to find what I need to in order to run my business? The how and then the why. Why am I doing this? Why do I need to partner with somebody? Why do I need to have a tax consultant or an accountant or the books? Find out about what the government says about tax and what the laws say. And how do I keep those laws? Keeping your books, keeping your records to comply with tax regulations, to comply with company regulations if you have a company. So always remember the who, what, when, where, how, and why, when thinking about all these different things.
This has definitely helped me because it's something that I have not heard anyone else in the industry say like the way you've explained it. Maybe I haven't been around enough business coaches to know it, but I think it definitely gives us a kind of clear perspective and it's practical things that can. So I can take my notebook and I can write it down and I can write it down for myself and I can write it down for someone else to review, which I think is really awesome. Maybe the other question that I would like to ask, if Farmer X is now, like Gugu was explaining, trying to find the ways to go about wearing all of these hats as an agribusiness owner or as a person who's starting out in the industry and need to balance all of these things. Would it be advisable to say, okay, I'm going to bring someone on board that I trust to do this with me, or I'm going to try and navigate it on my own for a while until I'm ready to bring people on board? Or do I go to a person like Frugal or Sheen or Mbali and Lungaela to help me from day one? What advice do you have in terms of that? And also, what are some of the tools or resources available to assist this farmer if they're alone in it completely? Frugal, maybe you can take this one, or Lungaela.
I've got a bit of an opinion. I know that it's extremely unpopular. So I'm actually sitting now in my garden and what I tend to do, gardening is actually a great example for me. So I've got pumpkins, tomatoes, spinach, bok choy, mealies. I've got a very nice vegetable garden. And what I find is that a lot of times people don't want to start small. They want to go extremely big and make a lot of money very quickly. But the problem is that they haven't actually tested and see what works and see if there is a fit for them. So what I find is that, and it's even with me in the gardening, it's been a couple of years that we've been gardening, and what I found is that certain things grow and certain things do not grow in my garden. And for me, very much, this is a sign to say, maybe I should start very small to start off with. Maybe I should see, is this something that I actually want to get into? If you're a small business owner and you want to start a small business in farming. And it's for me, if I can start with something small, I can scale it and I can grow it. So to answer your question, for me, I can say, let me first see if I like this, and then I can grow and scale it. Then, we can maybe look at funding, maybe getting people on board. But it doesn't help if you really don't know anything about the industry and then suddenly you're like, oh, you want to get people on board or you want to get funding. But if you have something, if there's any momentum that you have in your business, or if you can say, listen, I've tried tomatoes, for example, they tend to just grow like crazy in my garden, like just absolutely crazy, coming up everywhere. But if you can just say, listen, here's some tomatoes, here, you can give it a try, give it a taste. And then you've got something at least. And then you can build on that momentum that you've started.
I'll have to come by and get some of those tomatoes. But maybe it's so important. And I think that when you're starting out, you're so excited and you're enthusiastic and you're like, let's do this. Let's go crazy. And taking the time to really sit down, think about it and reflect and start very small is important. Don't you think, Gugu?
Absolutely don't. That's the thing about farming, right? The perception, especially when you're very excited about it, just going to speak from my experience, is that you think it's easy. You think, give me 10 hectares, right? All I need to do is plant seeds and apparently I'll get X amounts according to the government PDF documents. So it's very interesting. I love what Frugal said about scaling your plan. And oftentimes, I'm sorry, Dawn, I'm going to from a small farmer's perspective here. Oftentimes you don't have any money, but you have a passion for farming. You really want to make this work. So in terms of the top how to balance your books, we are always told that the finance part of our business plan, because our business plan essentially is a ticket to getting money, it needs to consist of a cash flow, a balance sheet, an income statement, and enterprise budget. So maybe you guys can just help us understand those terminologies.
Rasheen, I'm going to give you a moment in a second. I think I want to break it down even smaller than that for starters. And then I'm going to throw over to you. It's very important that you understand about a statement of cash flows and you understand about all of these things. But I think just one step back from that is, there's a simple idea of money in and money out. And I think if you're really, really small and you want to start out, you need to start looking at the simple concept of money coming in and money going out. So, for example, if you need to spend money on water, or you need to spend money on seeds or on compost or on pesticides or whatever the case might be, you need to make sure that you understand the idea of this money that is going out. And you need to understand the concept of money coming in. Rasheen, I think it's much more in your sphere with regards to the statement of cash flows and explaining all of those great details.
Well, Frugal, I wish I could explain things as simply as you do, but let me give it a go. Ultimately, what you were saying is you are going to make, however big or small you are, you're going to have an outlay of expenses initially. You're either going to have to buy the land, or if you have land, or you are renting land. So you're going to have money in some form, and that would be you're going to derive expenses. So you're going to have rent of the land, you're going to have seed and compost and water and all of those things, fuel and all of those expenses. So ultimately say, right, these are my expenses, and you have to put through a projection of what your income would be. So based on this piece of land that I have, and please forgive me if I just use very simple terminology, land or X amount of livestock. And from this, I can, because remember, it's always forecasting. So you're working through this, and you're either telling yourself or you're telling your future investors, in your business plan that these are my projections for what I'm going to be able to earn as an income with what I have. So ultimately, the income statement, that's the first one of the four that Gugu spoke about. The income statement, remember, an income statement is for a period of time. So you would look at a year. Very often in a business plan, if you are an investor, they want to maybe see it for 3 years. But ultimately, it's for a period of time. It can be for a month, it can be for a year. And an income statement is for that period. What was the income and what were the expenses? And then income less expenses is either your profit or your loss. And for future projections, all you have to say is, this is what I'm projecting the income to be. And then, of course, you have to make certain assumptions, and you will also explain the assumptions that you made in order to get those numbers. Then the balance sheet is what your assets and your liabilities are. So your assets, say a simple, I've got livestock, it's worth 1,000, and borrowed money to buy that livestock. So I've got a liability of 1,000. So that would be your assets less your liabilities, and that's what a net asset balance value is. But your assets and liabilities, it's really all the assets, and of course it's the assets that are used in order for you to generate income, and it's liabilities in order for you to generate income. So you borrow money to make money. So I'm not saying always, but that can be one of the things. And a cash flow is really from your operations, from the sales that I make, less the expenses that I make, I ultimately end up with a profit. So that's the first driver of cash flow, is profit. How much profit am I actually going to make? And then, of course, from that profit, if you are in a bracket that you have to pay, if you are a company and you have to pay taxes, whatever's left over. So paying taxes is also another cash flow out. So you would have income less expenditure equals your profit. So profit is the main driver of cash flow. And then from there, what else is in and out? So you would just have to document when the money is going to come in and when the money is going to go out. And that's your cash flow. And then there was another one, Gugu, that you asked about, an enterprise budget. I'm not 100% sure whether I've covered that in speaking about the income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow, because those can either be for historical, you would put them in your business plan to show that you've got history for your business, and then you would project in the form of a projection, a forecast, a budget. Those are all different names for the same thing. So that's looking forward.
Definitely does. And you've, explained it so beautifully. And yes, my last question was on the enterprise budget, but if possible, maybe we can pass that one on to Lungelo as a person who did enterprise budgets in university. Sorry to put you on the hot seat, Lungelo, but I would like to hear more on that. Roshan, I just have a follow-up question about the cash flow. Again, speaking for the small farmers, basically a cash flow, as you mentioned, is like your sales projection, right? And I feel like it's a bit difficult to prepare, because basically it's an educated guess about when and how much money will come in and out of your business. And it can be projected for over a year. And, if I'm going to be writing down my business plan, my financial plan, and I'm going to say that I'm going to make 10 Rand of spinach, my first customer as a farmer is probably going to be the fresh produce market, and those prices go up and they go down and they go up. So, how do we navigate through that? Because we essentially don't know how much we can make. So maybe just if you can help us understand that, because I know if you're doing a financial plan, they want to see your cash flow. They want to see that you even know what you're talking about.
I'll take that question first, Gugu, and then I'll hand over to Lungaela. With regard to your projections, if you have history, say you're not starting off from scratch, and you have, say, been farming for a month or 6 months or a year, use your historical numbers. Use what you already know. And if you have, say, you've sold spinach 10 times at 10 different prices, you'll then just work with an average. So the more information you have about your business, the better projections you can make. And look, I'm excluding if there's a crop failure, if there's an horrendous thing that comes in the future, but generally. So you would base it on your historical data, so what your business has looked like. And if you are starting from scratch, the best thing is to do lots of research and put many, many assumptions into all of these things. It is an educated guess, but it must be an educated, calculated estimate. That sounds a bit dodgy the way I said that. It's not dodgy. It isn't. If you can research as much and speak to people, what is the probability of me selling spinach 6 times a year or having this crop twice a year? Once you build all of those assumptions into your business plan and you know why you have put those numbers in, it also shows how well you know your business and how well you know what you're getting yourself into.
Thank you so much, Rasheen. I'm going to give Lungaela a chance just to respond to your last question, and then I see that Mbali would like to contribute, and then we have Farming with Shana, who's also here as a listener, but also to contribute.
Rosen has covered most of the things because the budget and the forecast has some similarities. But in terms of the enterprise budget, maybe if we can try to explain it, unlike the projection where we are trying mostly to estimate the long-term future, 3 years to 5, it's more kind of operational and it's more kind of short-term. It's just how you govern your personal financial budget in a year. It's usually based on operational, on the current circumstance. Because remember that the projections are usually sometimes based on you receiving the funding. So you're saying if I receive the funding, then I project that I could make so much. But then the budget usually does not include the funding so basically budget is what in most cases we use it for our operations, running our day-to-day operations. So you can start it from 12 months, you can break it down to a month to month, some break it down to a week to week. In a nutshell, that's what the budget is all about. So I'm saying the similarities, but I think that's where the difference is. Basically a budget usually looks at current, the next short term, 6 months, 12 months based on what I have now, and the projections, obviously, if I receive so much funding, then you can be able to extrapolate.
I think that was definitely good context. Thank you so much, Lungaela. Mbali, you'd like to also share?
So with regards to this topic, I think it becomes very important to distinguish because financiers always want a breakdown of everything. And I think as a startup farmer, one usually doesn't know where to get the information to say what really needs to go in when it comes to the pricing and the projections. I think Google raised that, it's an educated guess, but where do we look for this type of information? And I think some of the platforms that have provided some of this information for us, the banks, so ABSA Trends, Standard Bank has Trends, as well as FNB. I don't know if the other banks also offer it, but a good place to start would see what are the trends looking like in the particular markets or commodities that you would like to go into. And there you can get a slight idea of, okay, the price was so much when the crop was out of season, and how much is it when it is in season? And then we can go then and look at the Joburg market or the Cape Town market to say, what is the price looking like? What are the trends looking like on a daily when it comes to commodities that we trade only locally? I think that kind of information becomes really relevant on how we project things going forward. The enterprise budget, when we look at it, we see to know what is happening in that industry. So we want figures that are based on, if you're working on cattle, it must be around cattle. You know that a cow must eat, a cow must go for inoculation.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Mbali maybe dropped in our Google or if it's just on my side. I think the network is maybe an issue for her. Shana, do you maybe want to ask your question and then we'll run with the rest of our talking points for tonight? Shana, over to you.
I joined a bit late, but I just want to add, what the speakers have been talking about. I'm going to focus more on the financial parts of the plans. So I understand that many things that you need to put in, especially when you're balancing your books. So I'm just going to focus especially on that part Google wanted some clarity. I think it's Lungaela who clarified about the enterprise budget. So, and then also answer the last speaker, his question, where we can maybe get this kind of information. So usually from the Department of Agriculture, but it's called COMBUD, COMBUD. So it's available. You can have COMBUD dating back 90s to now. It's per commodity. It breaks down like every single cost of how to produce 1 head of cabbage. So it's got grains, it's got cabbages, it's got vegetables, even livestock. So you can request it from any local Department of Culture around your area. They'll be happy to assist you. Now, the problem is, how then do you interpret it and convert it to suit your own business plan or your own commodities? Because usually when they give it to you, it's locked. So you can't edit it. It comes as it is and you can't do nothing. So you need to convert it. So now, if you have no prior knowledge of Excel, then it's going to be a mission. Because then you have to formulate your own formulas and, Excel is always a nightmare. I'll just focus mostly on this enterprise budget. But usually what I do for them like a combat. So how do you break it down? So you just include simple things. So the first thing on your table, you include stuff like estimated income. So how much per, if your unit is in K per ton, how much per ton of, say, your grain is going to yield at the end of each production year? So if you have your production years in let's say 2 a year, so you have your production cycles, let's say 2 production cycles. So you will have maybe 2 in a year. And then quantity of your produce will you get, and then you put and then also the value per quantity or a value per batch of those produce of yours. So that's what you put up there in your income. Then you have your second column, which I call it estimated cost. There you put also unit, also how much it costs per unit, and also the quantity that you're going to produce per unit, and then also the cost per batch. And then underneath it, you have total cost. And then underneath it, then you have your gross margin. So your gross margin is basically minusing your total income minus your total cost, and then you have your gross margin. Usually that's what I do for an enterprise budget. So, and then you can do it per commodity. So you can do it per cabbage, you can do it per maize, or whatever commodities you produce on your farm, or you can compile it all, but it's so advanced when you're compiling it all. It's easy to do it per commodity. But that's what I usually do for people who ask me to lend help when I'm doing the enterprise budgets.
Thank you so much, Ashana, for that. So please do share. You just gave us a tip. You can't just leave us hanging. Please do share how we can, access that and prepare budgets more easily, because it does come as templates and it's difficult for us to understand. So if you could break down the enterprise budget templates for us, that would be super, super duper. I have a question with regards to balancing financial plans and all these accountants jargon. So when do we prepare this balance sheet? I know many farmers and many businesses actually, they balance their book. Is there a right time to do it? Is there a wrong time to do it? Because, when farmers make money, it's probably like 3 times a year or 4 times a year after farm production has been sold or when the inventory is at the lowest. So when is maybe the right time to prepare or balance our books? That's my question. And I'm going to ask Frugal.
There's obviously a couple of times that you would want to prepare your books. If you are splitting your business and your personal things, which I think is very important, obviously if it is a PTY limited, then obviously for tax purposes, you need to have all your statements audited and use other big words. But I think also it's very important that you be on top of the things to make sure that listen, I'm going to make money or this is really going bad, so that you don't sit at the end of the year and you're like bankrupt. So I think that it's very good to be on top of your finances and at least just check monthly what's going on so that you sort of know, am I going to make it? How's the money going? And the process of that. I think the other one that you would probably do that as well is that if you are looking for funding, many banks, and whether it's another private company or whether it's a government grant, you're going to have to prepare some form of documents to say, this is what I've done, this is the projections for what I want to do. You're going to have all of that paperwork as well. But I think the value for me in having financial statements and having your books in order and balancing your books is you know what's going on in your business. And many people don't know what's actually going on in their business. If you know what's going on in your business, can I expand? Can I grow? Can I scale it? Or is it maybe, hold on, I first need to focus on one thing and get it right for now. It's literally sometimes that you have to just get your roots in. And sometimes that is what the books will tell you. Your financial statements will tell you that. Or it can tell you, listen, it's going really well. You can grow your business.
Frugal, I think both Roisin and Umbali want to say amen to that. Roisin, maybe your comments while Umbali tries to do another network.
Amen to what Frugal said. Absolutely. And he's a successful businessman and he knows the value of knowing what's going on in your business. It's good to know what's going on in your business. It's good to know on a monthly basis. How did the month go? How did the year go? If I can just add 2 things, don't wait until the end of the month to record your transactions. Record everything that happens. Get into a routine on a daily or every 2 days or whatever. If you are doing this yourself, get into the habit of keeping your records. And if you are doing this yourself, do it daily. Just get into that routine. It's like writing a journal. Just record everything, all your transactions. And yes, absolutely, look at knowing your numbers. Another thing that knowing your numbers is so important because you can then make the decisions. It's really about decision making. It's your business. These are your numbers.
Frugal, I see your hand is up. I also want to give Lungaela just the chance to also comment. But Frugal, you want to say something based on what Roisin is saying?
Absolutely. So I just want to tell a quick story. I actually have a friend and he's been running his business with what they call a slippy box. And it's literally every time that he buys something for the business, he pops it into this box. And at the end of the month, he takes this huge box and then gives it to his accountant. Now, this is really bad because the slippies get damaged and they get, sometimes they fade. So what I suggest, use your Google Drive, take a picture of your slips so that you have it. And what I can recommend as well, if you don't have an accounting system at this point in time, pop it into a spreadsheet. When you buy it, get into the habit. As you get the invoice, just pop it into the spreadsheet so that you just have scope of it and you have it digital. Because if those slippies do disappear and things and SARS do come knocking and say, okay, but where's the slippies? Then you can send them already digital copies of everything.
So no slippy copies. Lungaela, you wanted to add something?
I agree with Frugal and Roisin just to say, financial statements are very, very important because they give you a breakdown of what's happening in your business. Because, for example, a bank statement will give you in terms of cash, in terms of income and expenses, but it will not give you, let's say you have debtors in your business, people that owe you. You've got suppliers that you pay maybe after 30 days and stuff like that. So the financial statement will not give you that because the financial statement doesn't keep debtors and it doesn't keep creditors. The bank statement won't tell you how much inventory you have, how much stock you have in your warehouse. It's only when you do your financial statement that you'll be able to see on the balance sheet how much stock do I actually have, how much debtors do I actually have. Are they paying me or are they not paying me? It's very important whether you prepare your financial statement monthly or you do them quarterly or annually, but at some point in time, they are the ones that are going to give you a full view of what's happening in your business. I'll just make one example. When you look at your bank statement, you might be excited and say, well, I'm having a lot of cash, because the bank statement shows you a lot of cash, but only to find out that maybe you have the cash, but you're not buying enough stock. And then next month, the client comes, they want an order of 10,000, and then you realize that you only have 4,000 in your stock. So you see, you're excited about the bank statement, but then you did not get the full picture of the business. So financial statement play that role to give you at least the full picture of what's happening in the business.
Thanks so much, Lungaela. And I think that's a very important aspect, to get a holistic view of everything. And that comes back down to that question I asked Google earlier about, you're wearing so many hats, and then you have to keep a handle of all of this. That also feels like a lot of hats in one pool. So you kind of have to be a magician when you're a farmer as well. My next question would also be around farmers having to navigate in extremely unpredictable, uncertain spaces. And especially when you consider, and I think you mentioned this before, Gugu, climate change, adapting to what's happening elsewhere in the world. When we think about what's happening now in terms of Russia invading Ukraine, that affects us, and it affects producers whether they want to acknowledge it or not. I mean, the petrol price hike, for example. What advice can we get from our speakers that are here to maybe give us an idea of what is this type of safety nets you need to have in place when you're navigating this very dynamic landscape? Roisin, can I maybe start with?
I think the first thing that one can guard against is finding out as much as possible about your business, so that you are not the pandemic, so that you are not the person who lets your business down. So number one, make sure you put yourself in the best possible position for you not to be the one that hinders your business. Things like income protection, things like insurance come about, reading a lot, research. And of course, you can research too much. But if you have a few people whose voices you trust, and if the research that you trust, follow that so that you know in advance what might happen or what the repercussion of something might be. And then you know that you've got to make changes today in order to mitigate the issues later on. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Thanks so much, Roisin. I think that's very important. Put yourself in a position where you're not the one jeopardizing your own business. I love that. Mbali, I want to try and get you on board. I think you have so much to contribute, but your network is just not playing along. Can we try and test it?
Yes. I'll just tell a short story. The tea farmers are going through the worst. So the tea prices dropped by half last year, and now they've dropped by another almost 60%, close to 70% for some. And they're all saying, but what could we have done to do it better, or to make sure that we are not in this situation that we are on now? So the one thing we always say is diversify, diversify, diversify. Yes, when you're starting up and diversify, you can't rely on having different enterprises or different commodities on your farm. But that becomes quite a critical role, because it's not every commodity that will be in the low at the same time. So maybe the tea prices is currently low, but the sheep prices are soaring because we're going into Easter, or we are back in the mode of having the country open and now the steakhouses are all open. So that is one piece of advice that we always give our farmers. And another thing is, you need to almost know the cycles of when to expect what in the farming industry. So to say fish is now popular because everybody is going in a certain way or eating health conscious foods. For now, that's where the trend is going. And maybe cattle or big livestock is no longer popular. So you need to almost know these trends and understand what could be the possibilities. But also when it comes to climate change as well, we almost know in the agricultural space when to expect heavy rains, La Nina, El Nina vibes. Also be very cognizant to know that you are on top of that.
Thank you so much. I think that's very important. And of course, staying abreast of the latest news. You can always come to Food from Zanzi for that. I think it's important to join spaces like this one. All right, Gugu, you're there. Maybe something you'd like to add, and then we'll go to last comments from our speakers, just in terms of some of the practical advice and how we can live more frugal like frugal.
So I just wanted to ask, because I think what we're getting here and what we're learning from our wonderful speakers is that, basically without balancing your books or even having a balance sheet, you can't detect any red flags in your farming business. So it really puts you in a position where you're understanding your business and you can make projections and really be successful and grow from what your books are revealing to you. I guess my last question would be how to prepare this balance sheet. When is there a need to employ an accountant? Because oftentimes people are always giving us advice as farmers, let your accountant deal with the books. And I'm just like, I don't even have an accountant. So when is it really necessary to acquire the service of an accountant, acquire the service of business advisor? Is it worth us taking our money and investing in such services? Or can we just do it on Excel?
Shall we let the accountant answer first? Lungelo.
I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, especially if you're starting, it's a one-man show basically. But obviously, there are things in life that really you might need and expect or something like that. Let's say you're dealing with contracts. As much as obviously you know the business, but we all know that contracts are done by lawyers, or the best contracts are done by lawyers. So at some point in time, you might obviously prepare your books, but you might at some point also need the service of an accountant. As you know, there's SARS and all those things. Maybe in that space, this is just my last point. Of course, as the owner of the business and a one-man show, you've got to know a bit of that and that and that. You don't have to be an expert in accounting, but at least, as we're saying, know what an income statement is, know what a cash flow is. So that when that accountant prepares something that doesn't look like a cash flow, they say it's a cash flow, at least you can be able to point out. So you don't have to necessarily be an expert in the products and understanding the production, but also because you're a one-man show, at least know a little bit of that, know a little bit of marketing, know a little bit of what is a business plan, know a little bit of how books at least should look like, know a little bit of tax there and there. That's the advice I can give, but I can definitely say if you feel overwhelmed by accounting, then maybe you need, obviously to outsource your accounting to an accountant. I know they can be expensive, but there are those obviously who specialize in startups whom their price range is actually affordable. So that's it from my side.
And I guess the most important thing is also you won't know until you ask. So if you speak to Lungelo, ask Lungelo, hey, my guy, what's your price? Can we negotiate? I'm starting out. Can we see where we can maybe get advice from you? And then we grow from there as the business grows. Mbali, I see you also first want to unmute your mic when Google asked the questions.
So Google is with financing, firstly, to always have these things, all your ducks in a row. And also, it doesn't have to be the proper financial statements that are signed and audited that we would require in the financial sector, but we would like to see management accounts. So the fact that you know what is coming in and out of your business is always important. Those receipts that Frugal spoke of, you need to make sure that you understand how much goes in and out. And if you can explain that to me in layman's term, then I can be willing to see the picture that you are currently painting to me.
Thanks so much, Mbali. And then maybe I can ask the last two speakers here tonight to answer the last question around the practical advice that they would want to give small business owners, to live and run a more frugal operation. Is there a way for you to get rid of non-essential expenses and the non-essentials that you really don't need? So ensuring that you don't live beyond your means. How do you save as much as you can and ensure that you run it as efficiently as possible? Roisin, I'm going to start with you.
I'm a numbers person who loves people, okay? And I love business. But that numbers thing, honestly, make record keeping your daily habit when you start your business. If you make that record keeping your daily habit, you will then get to know your own numbers. Even if you only do a few transactions a week, you will get to know your numbers and you will get to know the impact of one thing on another. And that was my second point for don't ever look at a number in isolation. If you say I made 100 Rand, well, did you make 100 Rand today? Or was it last week? Or was it in 1 year? Or 100 Rand per something? Always look at a number in relation to something else. So if you are looking to be more frugal and you're looking at expenses, look at those expenses in relation to something else. Because you might see that, okay, this is an expense to have a business analyst, a business coach, a business consultant, an accountant, a lawyer. But with having that, you have more time to go and do the work is going to generate more income. And then that relationship between those two numbers makes sense for you. So I hope that makes sense. Keep a daily habit, and also don't look at a number in isolation.
Thanks so much, Google. I think we're getting so much great advice from our speakers here tonight. Frugal, your last comments, and then we'll wrap up for the night.
I think the final thought that I want to have, and we've spoken a lot about income, expenses, and crisis management, all of that, but there's this magical word that I am very fond of in my business, and that is something called an emergency fund. Now, some people call this a contingency fund. There's many other words that people call this, but for me, I want a little bit of money that I put to the side in case I have a crisis. So I highly recommend having some money on the side in a separate account somewhere, for you personally as well as for your business. Now, I'm not saying put in billions and billions of rands in that emergency fund, but if something does go wrong and you don't have the money available, then you can use that for something that's unplanned and an emergency. So that is a very big tip that I want to give. And I think the second thing is that I just want to mention, please don't spend money on things in your business that's not going to make you money. I know that it's nice to have that double cab, but is it really going to make you more money, more than the bucket you have now? So that is just the final thoughts from me, being frugal. And again, thank you so much for the space. It's been really great.
Thanks so much, Google. It's been great having all of you with us. Google, that wraps it up for tonight's Gather to Grow.
Well, Dawn, thank you so much for the space on Gather to Grow. I really learned a lot. And I think, it's not easy to be a farmer. And as you said, just so many hats. But I'm glad to see that it can be simplified. Do your record keeping, keep your slips, show what you're making and what you're taking out. I think that really summed it up for me so nicely and beautifully. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Google. And it's always great to have you with us. And I'm looking forward to join. And then, as I mentioned before, this session will be available on Food for Mzansi's YouTube channel if you missed any of the discussions. And if you maybe want to go back and review and listen again, we'll also publish an article on Food for Mzansi. So thanks so much for everyone who's listening. And thanks so much just for being here and being here every week. The regulars, the newbies. Bye, Donkey. Thank you so much and have a great evening further. Bye for now.